Hey everybody, we're back on $40 in Paris. It's just me and Alondra this time, and we will be discussing neurotypical standards in information processing and how you do in school, how you just see and process information in your daily life.
Hello. So today we're going to be having a general discussion about mental illness and what is associated with that when it comes to certain traits that these mental illnesses bring up. So whether that be certain anxieties or certain obsessive traits that may appear in facets of everyday life, whether that be in a lot of the times a public setting, in school, in classrooms, or just in your general relationships in life. We want to have a discussion about that. And so the people with these needs who may need an outlet for their anxiety, a lot of the times there are a lot of people that you may have seen, and then oftentimes these people get labeled with them being weird or being an outcast or whatever, just because they happen to need something that the average person doesn't.
I think it's a good thing to bring up how the general label of weird is thrown on pretty much everybody in this sort of situation, because we're not when people who have different needs are subjected to, bullying or misunderstandings or any sort of different interpretation by, their peers they're studying with, it's usually, I don't know if I want to say it's because they don't recognize the traits of mental illness, although sometimes if people are young, they obviously don't. But there's this phenomenon if people process things different than, I feel like when you're in school and when you're learning, when you see people who aren't processing it the exact same way as you, in that young age, like elementary school, middle school, even into high school, although at that point I'd argue it's ingrained, if you don't see someone treating their education or the way they focus in the exact same way as you don't really know what to call that, so you immediately just go with weird.
Yeah, and especially during that time, you're growing up, these are experiences that are going to be shaping who you are as a person whenever you're older. And not to mention that you're in these, mass, in a way, it's like mass education. It's crafted in a way that you're in a classroom stuck with 30, 40 plus people, and everyone is experiencing different things, and a lot of the times you don't want to be left out of that, and you don't want to risk being what everyone calls weird, or this, you don't want to be labeled as someone who can't function on their own. Because I think society puts a lot of emphasis on just being able to be, unique, and being able to be self-preserving in a way.
And it's also interesting because I know a lot of people personally who did not get diagnosed for their mental illnesses until, I would say, average age 17, exiting high school. And a lot of that, I think, at least from a personal point of view, is that if you have a different sensory needs or processing needs and you realize this while in a school environment, you've probably already been put under this label of the weird kid, and it's not enough to just call a single person weird in primary education. The types of people who do that always classify you with the weird kids, plural. So what I've noticed is acknowledging even to yourself or to a primary care physician that you might have different processing needs or different ways of processing information. Sometimes you push that down because it is associated with being a weird kid. And I know personally, if I had accepted that a little earlier, my schooling probably would have been a lot easier for me if I had been able to have the sensory tools that I need to focus and know how to organize my notes, because they don't necessarily have to be pristine. If they just make sense to me, that's okay.
Right. I feel like they're, especially in public school systems, they put this emphasis on just the way that they make you take notes. You learn Cornell style and all of that crap that I don't ever.
I hate it.
I think so. I don't know. It's supposed to help you, learn how to take notes, but you can't just learn how to take notes in that way. Like, everything is a different experience for everyone. Everyone's not the same. If one person needs some sort of tool to help them get that information processed in the way that you described, like you said you wished that you had those tools, maybe for fear of being outcast, you didn't want to use those, or maybe just you didn't have that knowledge, you didn't know that existed. And I certainly didn't know that existed either. When I was growing up, we didn't, when we were growing up, we didn't have fidget spinners, and all of that. We didn't have these toys. I didn't know that there could even be tools to manage something like that.
See, I knew that those existed, but and this is really funny. Time to get into some internalized ableism here. There's a reason it's called internalized blank, whether it's internalized misogyny, internalized racism, etc. It doesn't necessarily come from yourself, it comes from other people. So, like, everyone in my middle and high school, it was expected that you treated the kids who were quote-unquote obviously autistic if you were, like, friendly to them, or, didn't, like, turn your nose up at them when you walked away. Like, you would get labeled as one of the weird kids. I never understood why people did that. But the point I'm getting to is that I knew that these tools existed, but they were only in those specific classrooms. I don't even want to say this is an individual experience, because I'll go ahead and throw it out there. I'm pretty sure everyone has a kind of mean public school experience.
Yeah, literally.
But,
I should, I guess, clarify. I think I grew up with a fairly standard high school, middle school, high school environment. So obviously, there are some other things that I experienced as, a Latina woman, but that's for a different podcast. I didn't start noticing a lot of these tools until I started growing up and I started getting educated. I started realizing some of the things that I had within myself that I didn't realize before, that I needed help in figuring out how to learn, or figuring out, the best way of approaching a task. I didn't know how to do that because I wasn't taught how to do that. I wasn't aware of how I could manage, my study habits or whatever. And now, growing up as a college student, you begin to learn these things, and eventually you begin to learn it because you're forced into it and you have to figure out a way to do this. And obviously the exposure of, like, media, the good and the bad, it eventually exposes that in some way. And then you start realizing, oh, maybe I have some certain needs that I didn't realize I had.
Personally, I can relate to what you're saying, because what I noticed whenever we were in these classrooms, that me and other classmates would, like, pick up, like, the sensory tools that were in the classroom and mess with them when we thought nobody was looking at us.
Was this when you were in high school?
No, this was as early as middle school, I would say, but it still wasn't, like, palatable to, like, anyone to have those tools outside of that context, and that context also was obviously not palatable because everyone disliked those children. But that's where it gets into this whole discussion of, like, sensory tools is actually a asset to learning. Personally, I guess I'll throw myself under the bus here. I have a chew necklace and some kinetic sand that I bring to my classes with me. I can only speak for myself and the couple of my friends who, like, use these now and have found they help, but, like, a common misconception, probably because of the whole, like, media coverage, the way they chose to go with that, is that they're, like, a distraction. And for some students, yes, I'm sure they are a distraction.
And
but
it's become just a marketing tool, I think, at this point, or it became at that point, because we passed that phase.
Oh yeah.
It just became a marketing tool and a way to make money. And maybe one day one kid found out that a fidget spinner was what worked for them, and then that translated into them bringing that into their environment where they had their peers around, and their peers were like, oh, this is cool. let's do this for ourselves. But that, I feel like that only became that way because some kids are they seek this stimulation, this constant need for something to fill that void, that empty, like, there's nothing to do, I'm bored, I need something. There's always this constant need for some sort of activity. Now, there are these kids that are, I guess, maybe taking advantage of it. Now you have these teachers that are like, oh, this is a distraction. Now our kids aren't focusing, blah, 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 and now they're banned.
Everyone does require these stimulation needs to a point, but, like, as an autistic person, what I've observed is that, specifically fidget spinners, because that was what, like, blew up, they became, like, cool to have, but if you had them for, like, their actual intended purpose, it was still, like, considered weird. You would see kids doing fidget spinner tricks and, like, seeing how fast they could make it go and all that. I own a lot of STEM toys. My desk drawer doesn't have anything actually related to academia in it at all.
Just STEM toys.
Yeah, but it's like a double-edged sword because they're way more accessible now because of the whole media blow-up, but they're also not looked at in the way that they actually should.
Right. So, a little about me. Fun fact, I actually have trichotillomania. I think I also discovered that Harley also has trichotillomania. So, basically, if you don't know what trichotillomania is, it's this urge to pull out your hair. For me, it's a very compulsive urge. And most of the time it's to relieve, some tension or anxiety that you have. You seek this sort of release, and that happens whenever you pull your hair out. Whether that be it can be from different areas of your body, like your scalp, your eyebrows, your eyelashes, etc. And oftentimes you don't really realize that you're even doing it until it happens. And so, like, one of the ways that you manage this disorder is to have these fidget toys. And they're not always, fidget spinners. They can be, like, plastic worm toys that you can, like, move around. Something that just keeps your hands busy or distracted.
I like the rings, the ones that spin around. Those are nice.
They're toys. And so they're brightly colored. They draw attention. And it's marketed as a way, like, we know, people in the community know that it's not a cure. It's not an obvious cure that is going to take away all your compulsive needs to do this. And it's a tool. That's what it is. It helps you relieve that need that you feel like you have. I actually don't even have any fidget toys. I haven't bought any.
Amateur.
Yeah, I know. I really am. It's just, but I attribute that probably a little bit to the stigma of, these toys are weird. They draw attention. And I also have this thing where, I don't want to feel like I'm distracting anyone else in class. And I think that was just engraved to us, as kids from those classrooms where they did pull those kids out. It felt like it became a way of basically saying, oh, these kids are distracting others. And then feeling as if the other kids were a little bit more important.
I think that's a big thing because in personal experiences, I, like, again, due to internalized ableism, I, firmly squashed down all of my, different sensory processing needs. You couldn't really tell as much as other kids, but the approach with, kids who, quote-unquote, cause problems during testing at our school was never to, politely go up to the kid and say, hey, could you do that a little quieter? Could you do it in this way? Instead, it was always, all right, we have to get this kid out of the classroom because there was no other, alternative, which I think was really damaging to those of us who do have different sensory needs and how we grew up and saw ourselves.
Yeah. And I can only imagine what if these tools were available, at least when I was growing up, how that would have impacted I'll say scenario. So say if someone actually did have this toy and it was introduced and they felt like they needed it, how would that classroom, how would that dynamic work out? Would everyone else in the classroom feel as if it's a legitimate need, or would they feel as if it's just, oh, they get special treatment?
I feel like in that, that's a great hypothetical scenario, and now I'm wanting it for 9-year-old Harley. Sorry, kid, you're never gonna get it. But I think that's where we need to acknowledge normalization of different ways that people process things and different needs that people have starts in a collective sense. I have a friend who wants to be a school teacher. We got into this topic, and what I think would be good in this sort of department is, like I said, everyone does have these needs and physical or other stims to a point. Just because you chew your pen does not necessarily mean that you need something as full-fledged as a chew necklace, but that is still like a fidget stim. But in terms of having these tools available in the classroom and normalizing them and being like, all right, if you need this, please take it.
Yeah.
And then just, because I think the whole, like, novelty of when fidget spinners became elementary show-off thing, is because you would bring them in and they would be, like, novel and special because they weren't already in the classroom.
Yeah, it very much felt like, you know, they're one thing to point out is that they're already kind of trapped in this environment that they go to, you know, five times a week, and it's all the same, the exact same schedule, the exact same people. Having something new and in a way flashy is like wow to them. Normalizing that obviously would help with that feeling of like, oh, this is so new. And so now, in a way to normalize that, you would have to have them in all classrooms rather than just the specific classrooms that, you know, offer them.
So I think now that all the media buzz around fidget spinners and stuff like that has died down, it's taken long enough, but I think there is starting to emerge this sort of like critique of why these things are needed in the first place. It's not as visible as I would like it to be, but it's a step in the right direction. And I think where we can go from there is just better education of mental illness in schools.
And maybe not just like in schools, but also whether that be like work environments and stuff, because, you know, everyone eventually leaves school and now we're into these work environments, and obviously I think even in those environments it's probably seen as something even, I guess, worse in a way, like
because it takes away from like efficiency.
And like the professional,
shout out capitalism.
and like the professional view that, you know, is supposed to be there. You know, you shouldn't be playing with kids' toys or whatever. That's
I think now that this sort of more nuanced critique is coming out, we could use it for better education in both areas, and then just more widespread understanding of why people like process things the way they do. Not even take the focus away from fidget toys themselves and just start at the baseline with, okay, not everyone learns like you.
Yeah, exactly.
Would like take away from a lot of the ableism that's rampant in public school. So I was talking to my coworkers, and I said that I didn't get bullied for being autistic in school, but I sure did get bullied for being weird, and that was the exact same thing. So I think we really do need to teach kids that ultimately you are in school to learn, and everyone learns differently, and that is okay. And all this to say that we hope that this has provided a better lens into how people process information and learn differently. Shout out to all my professors this semester for letting me bring in my stuff and not make a big deal out of it.
Yes. And
we hope that this has been informative.
Yeah. So, some things that we want you guys to be on the lookout for. Our Donning and Lavender signups for Donning of the Stoles and Lavender graduation are now live, and you can go to our website, Multicultural Affairs, unca.edu, and go under the engagement tab, and you'll find the links to both of those signups. So if you're interested in any of that, or a friend is interested, please direct them to that. Another event that is upcoming, and you guys should definitely check out, the Black History Mobile Museum will be here on October 18th. Khalid El Hakim will be here, and he will be giving a lecture during the free hour from 12 to 1, again, Thursday, October 18th, but the exhibit will actually be on display all day. Another event to look out for is our Social Justice Coffee Hours. We're having our second Social Justice Coffee Hour, October 25th, from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. And your girl, Alondra, me, will be there. And it's going to be about patriarchy and women of color. So, very interesting topic. Please come on out. And there's going to be coffee, as always, and a lot of resources for you guys. So please come on out. And lastly, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, please. I like to post, and I would hope that you guys like seeing my posts. So yeah, shout out to UNCA_OMA. And I think that's it.
This has been $40 in Paris.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week.